Keep those bracelets on you completely safe. Okay? Good. Enjoy the show.
RoboCop stands as one of science fiction's most enduring creations, a chrome-plated icon of 1980s cinema that somehow transcends its era. Yet beneath the titanium exterior and quotable one-liners lies a layer of meaning, intention, and artistic sacrifice that most viewers never fully grasp. The film we think we know, a straightforward action blockbuster about a cop-turned-machine, actually conceals one of Hollywood's most subversive artistic statements. What if what you've always seen as just another sci-fi action film was actually a masterclass in subtle satire? What if the blood-soaked spectacle that delighted teenage audiences was simultaneously a scathing critique of the very culture that embraced it? And what if the most human character in the film isn't who you think it is? Let's pull back the curtain on this 1987 classic and examine what the cast and crew have revealed over decades of interviews and retrospectives. The insights they've shared transform not just how we see RoboCop, but how we understand the film's lasting impact on cinema and society. This is the untold story that changes everything about how you experience Paul Verhoeven's masterpiece. RoboCop emerged in 1987 during a transformative period in American cinema. The Reagan era was at its peak. Wall Street excess dominated the cultural landscape, and corporate America was being celebrated with unprecedented enthusiasm. Into this environment stepped Dutch director Paul Verhoeven, a European outsider with a distinctly skeptical view of American capitalism and militarism, who would create what appeared to be a straightforward sci-fi action film that was actually anything but. "I wanted to make a Jesus Christ story for modern America," Verhoeven has stated in multiple interviews. But instead of divinity becoming human, it was humanity becoming mechanical. This theological foundation might seem surprising for a film best remembered for its ultra-violence and memorable catchphrases, but it represents just the first layer of the subversive intent that would inform every aspect of the production. Writers Ed Neumeier and Michael Miner created a script that functioned simultaneously as a crowd-pleasing action film and a savage satire of corporate culture, media sensationalism, and American militarism. As Neumeier later revealed, "We wrote it straight enough that it could be consumed as an action picture, but with enough irony that it could be read completely differently." The studio executives at Orion Pictures, desperately seeking a summer blockbuster, largely missed this satirical dimension. As producer John Davison would later confirm, they thought they were getting Terminator meets Dirty Harry. They didn't realize they were funding a subversive art film, disguised as a crowd pleaser. And thus began one of Hollywood's most audacious, artistic sleight-of-hand operations. A film that would satisfy bloodthirsty action fans while simultaneously critiquing their appetite for violence. Peter Weller, the actor who would bring RoboCop to life, wasn't the studio's first choice. Michael Ironside and Arnold Schwarzenegger were both considered before Weller secured the role, a casting decision that would fundamentally reshape the character's essence. Where other actors might have leaned into mechanical intimidation, Weller approached the role with classical training and philosophical depth. "I studied mime with Marcel Marceau to prepare," Weller revealed years later. "I needed to find the humanity trapped inside this mechanical shell." This approach, treating what could have been a simple action hero as a complex dramatic character, created the emotional core that elevates RoboCop above its genre contemporaries. The public image of Weller as the stoic mechanical cop belied the extraordinary physical and psychological commitment he brought to the role. Encased in a suit that weighed nearly 80 pounds, unable to sit normally, and suffering temperatures that soared above 100 degrees inside the costume, Weller endured what amounted to a form of sensory deprivation that informed his performance. "In some ways, the suit imposed the character on me," Weller reflected. "I couldn't move naturally. I couldn't see properly. I was physically constrained in ways that mirrored Murphy's psychological imprisonment." The disconnect between the audience perception of a cool, indestructible hero and the reality of an actor suffering for his art mirrors RoboCop's own existential crisis. A machine desperately trying to reconnect with its humanity. But the true cost of Weller's commitment wouldn't become fully apparent until the cameras started rolling. When filming began in August 1986, the RoboCop suit created by Rob Bottin wasn't completed. The first versions arrived on set 6 months behind schedule, with filming already underway. What most fans don't realize is that RoboCop nearly collapsed under the weight of its own iconic image. The now legendary suit, designed by special effects maestro Rob Bottin, represented a critical turning point in the production, one that almost derailed the entire project. When the suit first arrived on set, it was a disaster, recalled director Paul Verhoeven. Peter couldn't move in it. We'd scheduled 2 days to shoot the first RoboCop scenes, and we got nothing usable. The suit, which had been conceptualized without fully considering the human being who would have to perform inside it, required Peter Weller to take nearly 11 hours to get in and out of the costume. Shooting fell 7 days behind schedule in the first week alone. Executives from Orion Pictures flew to the Dallas set, threatening to shut down production. In a last-ditch effort to save the film, Verhoeven, Weller, and a movement coach worked through an entire weekend to develop a distinctive way of moving that would appear robotic, but still allow Weller to function within the cumbersome suit. We developed what we called the RoboCop, walk over 72 sleepless hours, Weller later explained. It wasn't just about looking mechanical. It was literally the only way I could move in that suit without falling over. This constraint, born of practical necessity rather than artistic choice, created the distinctive movement that would become one of the character's most recognizable features. The suit that nearly killed the film ultimately became its most iconic element, and that's when the real suffering began. The physical reality of creating RoboCop was far from the glossy finished product that appeared on screen. Peter Weller lost 3 pounds per day from sweating inside the non-ventilated suit. He could only film for 20-minute stretches before needing to have compressed air pumped into the costume to prevent heat exhaustion. I couldn't scratch my nose, Weller recalled. I couldn't sit down properly. Between takes, they'd prop me against a board at a 45-degree angle, because if I fell, I couldn't get up unassisted. The crew developed a system where Weller would call out numbers, corresponding to different discomforts. 1 meant he was overheating. 2 signaled a need for water. And 3 indicated an immediate bathroom break was required. Nancy Allen, who portrayed Officer Lewis, observed the transformation in her co-star. Peter entered this almost meditative state to endure the suit. By necessity, he had to disconnect from much of what was happening around him, which, ironically, mirrored Murphy's own journey of disconnection from his humanity. The famous scene where RoboCop catches car keys in midair took 25 painful takes. The team built an entire cooling room, nicknamed the Meat Locker, where Weller could recover between shots. Despite these precautions, he was hospitalized twice for heat exhaustion during the summer shoot in Dallas, where temperatures regularly exceeded 100 degrees. Kurtwood Smith, who played the villain Clarence Boddicker, noted, "We were all dealing with the Texas heat, but watching what Peter endured gave everyone on set a kind of reverence for his commitment. When you see RoboCop moving with that mechanical precision, understand that it's not just acting. It's a man fighting against physical constraints that were actually torturing him." This suffering translated directly to screen in ways audiences never fully appreciated. Every labored movement and rigid gesture was as much physical necessity as artistic choice. But the physical challenges were only the visible part of a much deeper artistic battle. The most brilliant aspects of RoboCop's construction are the elements hiding in plain sight, subtle details and creative decisions that transform the film on closer inspection. 3 key components reveal the film's deeper intentions to attentive viewers. First, the media segments interspersed throughout the film weren't merely comic relief or world-building devices as many assume. As writer Ed Neumeier explained, those news breaks were designed as Brechtian distancing devices, forcing viewers to step back and recognize they were watching a constructed reality. The catchphrase, "I'd buy that for $1," from the fictional show It's Not My Problem, was a direct commentary on the mindless consumption culture of the 1980s. The placement of these segments, often following scenes of extreme violence, was a deliberate attempt to implicate the audience in their own voyeurism. Second, the evolution of Murphy's movement throughout the film contains a narrative most viewers miss. "We carefully mapped out how RoboCop moves," Verhoeven revealed. Early in the film, after his transformation, The movements are entirely mechanical. But as Murphy's humanity reasserts itself, we gradually introduced more human elements to his gait. This subtle progression represents the character's internal journey, externalized through physical performance, a storytelling technique that operates beneath conscious awareness. Most revealing is the use of point-of-view shots. When we see through RoboCop's eyes, the image is cold, digital, overlaid with targeting information. But as film scholar Carol J. Clover pointed out, the genius of these POV shots is that they make us both identify with Murphy's posthuman perspective and feel alienated by it simultaneously. These moments create a complex identification process where viewers experience both empathy for and distance from the protagonist, a cinematic technique that mirrors Murphy's own fragmented identity. The famous scene where RoboCop returns to his abandoned family home contains a detail almost no viewers consciously register. Murphy never blinks throughout the entire sequence, until the moment he experiences an emotional memory. This microscopic performance detail signifies the re-emergence of his humanity. But these artistic flourishes came at a cost that extended far beyond physical discomfort. Behind RoboCop's seamless final cut lay a bitter struggle between artistic vision and commercial demands. The film we know today almost didn't exist due to a fundamental clash between Verhoeven's satirical sensibilities and the studio's desire for a straightforward action blockbuster. The MPAA sent the film back for edits 11 times, producer John Davison revealed. We submitted and resubmitted again and again, trying to preserve the integrity of Paul's vision while getting an R rating instead of X. The original cut of the film was significantly more graphic, particularly during Murphy's death scene and the ED-209 boardroom malfunction. Verhoeven intentionally shot extreme violence to underscore the film's satirical dimensions. Violence so cartoonish, it crossed into social commentary. What few fans realize is that this battle wasn't merely about the quantity of blood. It represented a fundamental disagreement about the film's purpose. The studio executives wanted the violence toned down, not just for ratings reasons, explained screenwriter Eddie Neumeyer, but because they didn't understand it was satirical. They thought we were making a traditional hero's journey, not a scathing critique of American violence. The corporate boardroom scenes provoked particular tension. Orion executives recognized themselves in the film's portrayal of amoral corporate leadership and pushed for changes. As Verhoeven later admitted, they saw that we were mocking them, the very people funding the film, and they were not happy about it. Miguel Ferrer, who played ambitious executive Bob Morton, noted the irony. We were making a film about corporate exploitation while experiencing a version of it ourselves. The suits wanted to sand off the edges of a film that was specifically about the danger of sanding off humanity's edges. This tension extended beyond the film's violence to its philosophical core. The studio pushed for a more triumphant ending, while Verhoeven insisted on maintaining the film's ambiguous conclusion about whether Murphy's humanity had truly been restored. The battle for RoboCop's soul was ultimately settled through an unexpected compromise. The most profound irony of RoboCop's legacy is that its most scathing critique was embraced by the very audience it was criticizing. Paul Verhoeven, who had grown up in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation, brought a European skepticism to American militarism and capitalist excess. Yet the film became a commercial hit, precisely among the demographic it was subtly condemning. American audiences thought they were watching a celebration of power and technology. Verhoeven reflected years later. They didn't realize they were watching a deeply critical film about American culture. The film's poster featured the tagline, "Part man, part machine, all cop," a marketing approach that emphasized traditional heroism while completely sidestepping the film's satirical elements. Merchandising included RoboCop action figures for children, despite the film's R rating and graphic content. The character appeared in commercials for KFC and other products, the ultimate corporate co-option of an anti-corporate symbol. Perhaps most telling was the reaction of law enforcement and military personnel, who widely embraced RoboCop as a positive representation of authority. "We started hearing from police officers who loved the film," recalled Peter Weller. They were identifying with this character, who was literally created by corporations to replace human judgment with programmed responses. The ultimate irony emerged when actual police departments began adopting RoboCop as an informal nickname for their early initiatives to integrate technology into law enforcement. The Detroit Police Department, the very organization depicted in the film as being privatized and corrupted, had officers who proudly referred to themselves as RoboCops when testing new equipment. This misreading wasn't a failure of the filmmaker's vision, but rather confirmation of its insight. American culture's capacity to absorb and commodify even its own critiques. The film that set out to satirize violence, corporate greed, and media manipulation ended up as a merchandising empire that celebrated those very elements. RoboCop's initial reception revealed the gap between intention and perception that would define its early existence. Major critics like Roger Ebert recognized its technical achievements and entertainment value, awarding it 3 stars and praising its slick thriller surface. Yet many reviewers initially failed to acknowledge its deeper satirical dimensions, treating it primarily as an elevated genre film rather than the subversive commentary Verhoeven intended. The box office told a different story. The film grossed over $53 million domestically against a $13 million budget, a commercial success that immediately prompted sequel discussions. But this success came with a price. The corporate interests that demanded merchandise tie-ins and franchise opportunities were precisely the entities the film had set out to criticize. In a 1987 interview with Film Comment, Verhoeven expressed frustration. "Americans seem to miss the joke. They accept at face value what we intended as caricature." The critical breakthrough came gradually, as European critics began identifying the film's satirical elements that American reviewers had largely overlooked. French critics, in particular, recognized Verhoeven's critique of American culture, with Cahiers du Cinéma praising its savage indictment of Reagan-era policies disguised as entertainment. By the mid-1990s, academic film journals began publishing analyses of RoboCop as a postmodern text that deconstructed the very genres it appeared to embrace. Cultural critic Slavoj Žižek included the film in his examinations of ideology in popular cinema, noting how it depicts the inherent contradictions of late capitalism through its exaggerated embodiment. The film's status evolved from successful sci-fi action film to prescient social commentary. As corporate influence over public services increased throughout the 1990s and 2000s, RoboCop's depiction of a privatized police force and corporate control over civic institutions seemed increasingly prophetic rather than satirical. This critical reappraisal culminated in the film's 2007 induction into the National Film Registry, where the Library of Congress cited not just its technical innovations, but its sharp social critique and philosophical dimensions. The action film that fooled its own studio executives had finally been recognized for what its creators always intended it to be: a Trojan horse for social commentary. But RoboCop's influence extended far beyond critical reassessment. RoboCop's DNA is woven throughout contemporary cinema in ways that transcend its immediate sequels and reboots. Its influence shaped not just how action films look, but how they think. The film pioneered the integration of practical effects with philosophical depth that would later define works like The Matrix. As Lana Wachowski acknowledged in a 1999 interview, RoboCop showed that you could make a film with explosive action that simultaneously questioned the nature of humanity and consciousness. The character who is both human and machine, struggling with identity while fighting external threats, became a template for countless science fiction protagonists. Christopher Nolan has cited the film's moral ambiguity as an influence on his Batman trilogy. What Verhoeven did brilliantly was create a hero who was also a victim, a complex figure that challenged audiences while delivering visceral action. This balance between entertainment and provocation has become the gold standard for thoughtful blockbuster filmmaking. Beyond narrative influence, RoboCop revolutionized visual storytelling in action cinema. The POV shots from Murphy's perspective, with their heads-up display and digital overlays, created a visual language that has become standard in depicting augmented or artificial consciousness on screen. Films from Iron Man to Upgrade have borrowed directly from this visual approach. The film's influence extended into unexpected territories. Its dark, corporate satire provided a blueprint for how science fiction could engage with contemporary concerns, paving the way for films like District 9 and Sorry to Bother You. Television shows like Black Mirror have acknowledged RoboCop's pioneering blend of technology criticism and entertainment. Perhaps most significantly, RoboCop permanently altered how violence functions in smart action films. After RoboCop, excessive violence could be read as critique rather than just spectacle, noted film scholar Stephen Prince. The exaggerated, almost operatic quality of the film's brutality, particularly in the unrated cut, demonstrated how extremity could serve satirical purposes rather than merely shocking audiences. Even the film's marketing strategy, hiding its intellectual depth beneath genre trappings, has become standard practice for filmmakers attempting to smuggle complex ideas into mainstream cinema. As director Lee Wannell observed while making Upgrade, RoboCop is the template for how to make audiences think they're just getting an action movie when you're actually giving them existential philosophy. But beyond its artistic influence lies a more profound cultural impact. What makes RoboCop endure isn't just its technical accomplishments or even its satirical brilliance. It's how prescient its warnings have proven to be. The film has transformed from science fiction into something approaching documentary, as reality has caught up with its once exaggerated vision. The Detroit of RoboCop, bankrupt, crime-ridden, and on the verge of corporate takeover, seemed like dystopian exaggeration in 1987. By 2013, the real Detroit had declared the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history, with private companies indeed stepping in to provide services traditionally managed by government. As Detroit filmmaker Julian Temple noted, Verhoeven's vision wasn't fantasy, it was prophecy. The media landscape depicted in the film, sensationalist, superficial, and obsessed with violence, has been realized in the 24-hour news cycle and reality TV culture. The film's fictional catchphrase, "I'd buy that for $1," finds its real-world equivalents in viral catchphrases and memes, empty cultural signifiers that spread without meaning. The privatization of public services and militarization of police forces have accelerated in precisely the ways the film predicted. Private prisons, security contractors, and the integration of corporate interests with law enforcement have all expanded beyond what seemed plausible in 1987. Even the film's technological predictions have manifested with unsettling accuracy. Boston Dynamics' robotic police dogs bear more than a passing resemblance to ED-209. Police departments experiment with facial recognition and predictive algorithms that echo RoboCop's targeting systems. The integration of human and machine through prosthetics and neural interfaces is no longer science fiction, but emerging science. "We were trying to create a cautionary tale," reflected writer Ed Neumeier. But cautionary tales only work if people recognize the warning. The film's greatest insight may have been its understanding that technological progress would advance faster than ethical frameworks to contain it, that we would build the machines before fully considering their implications for humanity. In this light, RoboCop's most poignant scene, Murphy recognizing his own humanity while surrounded by the artifacts of his former life, becomes a metaphor for our collective challenge, retaining our essential humanity in an increasingly mechanized world. And that's why, despite its blood-soaked surface and dated special effects, RoboCop remains not just relevant, but essential viewing. RoboCop transcends its origins as a 1987 sci-fi action film because it recognized something fundamental about the human condition, our simultaneous fascination with and fear of transcending our limitations. The film's central question, whether humanity can survive its own technological evolution, grows only more urgent as we integrate machines more deeply into our lives and societies. What appeared to be a simple story about a cop becoming a machine revealed itself, over time, to be a profound meditation on what it means to be human in the face of dehumanizing forces, whether corporate, technological, or cultural. The struggle of Alex Murphy to reclaim his humanity, despite his programming, offers a blueprint for our own resistance against systems that would reduce us to mere functions. The next time you watch RoboCop, look beyond the explosive action and dated effects to recognize the film that has been hiding in plain sight all along. A deeply human story about the struggle to remain human in an increasingly inhuman world. Watch for the subtle performance details, the satirical media segments, and the philosophical questions embedded within the narrative. What you'll discover is a film far richer and more relevant than its reputation suggests. If you found these revelations about RoboCop illuminating, give this video a like and share your own observations about details you noticed on rewatching this sci-fi classic. Part man, part machine, but all cinematic brilliance.